Welcome back to Fishing with Vance. Well, I've owned this Pelican Bass Raider now for, I think, about 8 years. And what I'm going to do today is do a full review of the boat itself. And along with that, more importantly, probably a review of modifications that I've done to this thing over the last 8 years. Some of which I kept and some of which I pitched and were epic failures. Some had to be modified, even these were modifications that needed to be modified. And some that I still need to work on, which I will do this winter here in the old Fishing with Vance's garage. So stay tuned. That's what we're going to do today. All right, I'll start with the boat first. It's pretty straightforward. A lot of guys have reviewed their boats, but this, again, I've had this 8 years now. Overall, I'll just start with, obviously I love the boat or I wouldn't have kept it 8 years. And a lot of things I've added to it over the years, like the trailer and things like that, to make my process easier to get this thing in and out of the water. Because I'm a big believer, if you have a boat and it's hard to get in and out of the water and the process is a pain, you'll go fishing less and less. I know this. I had a bass boat years ago, and I found myself using it less and less over the years. So I had to get rid of it because it just wasn't worth having around or paying to store it or anything like that. But anyway, so the Pelican Bass Raider. Let's talk about the things that I like about it first. First and foremost is I like that it's portable. This thing, before I got the trailer, I used to load this in the back of my Toyota Tacoma, and it fit in the back of there perfectly. It was simple, easy to load here at my house. It looked a little tougher at the lake if it was a little higher. If it was more difficult to lift it up onto the tailgate, depending on where I was fishing. So I got the trailer for it. But overall, though, the fact that it's so light and portable, you have guys that actually don't have trailers or trucks that strap this thing to their roof, and I'd say that's probably the best thing about it, is it's so light and portable. So plus for that. Next, I would say is it is very stable for a boat that has the two pontoons here in the front. You see those down there? It's pretty stable. Now, full disclosure, I did tip this thing over one time. I was on the boat with my man Penner, and we flipped this thing over. And it was just because, we stood up on it. One of us stood up, and the other one was leaning in the same direction. And you wouldn't think it would go over, but it did. We're both bigger guys, so we did flip it over. And luckily, we were all okay. And the water was cold, I remember that day, and I face planted right into the lake. But other than a little bit of lost gear, overall, we were no worse for the wear. It definitely was a lesson to wear your life jacket. I'll never get on a boat without a life jacket, that's for sure. But this thing's not made to stand up on the sides, on the side of the boat. If you stand up in the middle, I don't think you could flip it over. But we were standing up on the side and then leaning to that same side, trying to free a lure, and we did flip it over. But having said that, I've stood up in the middle of this boat, stood up in the middle where you're supposed to, and it's not going to flip over. You might fall off, but it's still very, very stable. So that's another big plus for it. Another plus of this boat is it's very durable. I've had it 8 years, and you guys that have seen my videos on how I launch and load the boat out at my main lake, I pretty much have to run it aground. And I've checked the bottom of this boat, and it's just a little scratched up, but it's pretty tough. This Ram boat, this Ram X or whatever it is on here, it's pretty solid. So I try to take care of it, but again, I've had it 8 years, taking it in and out of the water that way, and no issues. So I do like that. I also like that it has these handles. I think the handles are nice on this boat. I've seen some of the other ones that don't have handles. I like where they placed them in the front and also along here in the back. Those work great And especially for, again, if you got two guys, you can load this thing onto a dolly or whatever it is that you're doing with it without any issue. I know that my old partner High Life had he had an 8E Pelican, and it didn't have all the handles that this one did. I can't remember exactly. It's been a while since I saw that boat, but it didn't have as many handles as this, so that would have been a detriment of the 8E. But this is the Pelican Bass Raider 10. It does not. This is before they made the 10E, so there was no electric. But that just led to one of our better modifications. All right, so I do like that. I also like, again, I said it's built pretty well. So, this thing, I fished on this thing for 8 years, and I estimate that I probably go fishing here in Pennsylvania, probably between, I'd say, on the low end 30 times and on the high end 50 times a season. So I probably go a couple, 2-3 times a week for 24 weeks. So it's in that neighborhood. Now there's some times in there I don't go at all due to weather or vacations or whatever like that. However, let's just call it 40 times a season. So this thing's gotten used a lot. And honestly, nothing has gone wrong with it. Knock on wood, I guess. So if something would happen to it tomorrow, it wouldn't owe me any money. That's for sure. I have used this boat, which is always, it's a positive. You don't want to buy a boat and then not use it. So I say, again, I'm going to say it's pretty durable. I'm not sure I love how this is put together, but it's never come off. It's never been a problem, so I can't really complain much about it. So the positives, pretty much portability, it's stable. You could put this thing pretty much anywhere because of it. That's a big positive and a plus of the Pelican. Like I said, I had a bass boat, a fiberglass bass boat, and I was pretty much, I don't want to say stuck, but I had to go to the bigger lakes. I couldn't really go to the smaller lakes here in Pennsylvania very easily or at all. This thing is so portable, you can pretty much put this anywhere. I didn't get a chance to fish the river this year, but I plan on it next year. It's just, rivers just got too low here, and I couldn't really get out there because it was so low. I don't know that stretch of river that I'm going to fish yet, so stay tuned for that next year. I'll put it there too. So you could pretty much put them anywhere. That's the best thing about it. Farm ponds, even bigger lakes. You could put this on the bigger lakes, and you'd be fine. So that's probably the biggest thing, is its portability, it's light, and the other thing is it's so moddable, so to speak. I don't know if that's even a word, but it's so easily modified. I know when we first started this channel years ago, I feel like High Life and I were one of the first people to start doing modifications, and I could be wrong about that. But now, there's so many great websites and great YouTube channels and forums on Facebook where guys are modifying the living heck out of these boats. And it's amazing what guys have done. It's just amazing. I know that we've done a lot of things. However, you see some of these other guys, they really, really modify these boats. So that's something that I think has got to be in the plus column. It's very easily modified. All right, let's talk about some of the negatives. And they're not a lot, but they're the same ones that we've always talked about. And that is the fact that I don't like that there's nowhere to keep your goods. There's nowhere to keep your cell phone. There's nowhere really to keep anything on here unless you keep it inside your bag. I think it's the Bass Hunter that has a place to put your keys and your wallet and your phone like that if something would happen. And it has a little compartment, a little container to keep your valuables, so to speak. So that's a negative. The other thing is, one of the bigger negatives is I don't think it has enough pole holders, if at all. I don't think we can count. I've modified this pole holder, and this thing needs fixed. I didn't like these this year; they were too high. But if you go without the pole the modification here, these things don't work very well. at all as a pole holder. You can set it there just while you're doing, whatever, but you can't even really put it in there and fish, and you definitely can't rely on it really, other than just to set it down temporarily. It's not something you could just put your pole down and leave it there. So definitely no real opportunity for pole holders. There's no pole holders other than those two. There are no pole holders in the back. These two that are in here are modified pole holders. So if you're fishing out of the back, you don't have any pole holder back there. Now, that does lend itself to modifications, which we'll talk about in a second, between our table and other guys I've seen that have, mounted pole holders on the side, things like that. But the boat doesn't come with any real opportunity for pole holders. So, again, a negative. Another, I don't think that the boat has enough places really to keep multiple rods. Now, again, this lends itself to various modifications, but there's no way I'm trusting putting my poles just on here. I know that I don't know what this is really designed for. I really don't know. I guess you could put a pole here and lay that there, but lay the rod down the side. But again, you're just asking to kick this thing overboard. My feet go up here, and you're going to kick a rod overboard if you put them up there without strapping them down. This is a modification. This wasn't on the boat. So really no good place to put your rods. And again, I may be asking a lot, but it is a negative. I'd say one of the biggest negatives is the floor as it comes. And it's going to be hard for me to show you this because we put a floor in. But any of you guys that are familiar with the boat, I have it down. You see that boat's nice and dirty. But that floor, without putting down the modified floor, that's the first thing that I tell people when I'm on the forums or YouTube channels. If I see somebody getting a new Pelican, first thing you got to do is put a floor down, because that, I don't even know what you want to call it, that floor that comes with it, I'm sure it's built that way for strength, but it is super uncomfortable, and you definitely can't stand on it. I'm not sure about, even if you sit for very long, it hurts your feet. So first thing you got to put in here is a floor. So having said that, I got to say the floor is a huge negative on this boat. You have to put something on it. I think we fished out of it not even 3 or 4 times before we put a floor down. So the floor is definitely a negative. The other little negative I would say is I don't think that these guys are very well built. I've broken a few of them. Those are the drain plugs. I don't think that they're very, I don't know how to say it, but they're just not very durable. You take them in and out of there a few times, and you start to lose confidence of whether or not they're going to stay there or not. I've never lost any, but I've broken them pulling the boat off the end of the trailer and also out of my truck. So I would call that also a negative. Another one that I would say is a negative is there's no real spot to put a battery. You see my battery here rigged up to hold it down so it doesn't jump all around. This is because of how we've modified the electric in this. We have the Anderson connectors, and I'll talk about that modification in a second. But when I first got the boat, I put the battery down here, and it was just in my way. It was in my in my feet all the time, no matter what. Even if I fish by myself, the battery down here, there's no real spot for it, designated spot. I've seen, again, the Bass Hunter and others that kind of have a space for your battery. There isn't one in this boat. Not that we've been able to use or really have any confidence in, especially with this big old Duralast car battery. So I'd say, again, this boat is really made for electric trolling motors, I would say. Even though I do have the Honda motor over there, I put the gas motor on it, and also the electric motor. And primarily I run the electric out of it just based on the lakes that I fish. But there's no real spot to put that battery. And even in the 10E, my son has the Pelican Bass Raider 10E that has the electric, and we didn't even use it because we like the Anderson connector set up. so well. So we didn't even use it. The battery's in the middle on his as well. So I'd say that's another negative. The lack of a space for the battery. Another one I would say is, it's not like I'm nitpicking, but I do love this boat, but these are the negative things that have come up over the last 8 years, is the seats that come with it. Now, I think they've upgraded that now. The Pelican NXT, I think it's called, is the one that's gray. It looks like they've upgraded the seats. At the time when I got the seats, they were just pure plastic. These ones I bought these at Dunham's. They're a little padding there, so they're not so bad. I don't tend to fish longer than, I don't know, maybe, I probably fish like 4 hours at a crack. But even if I'm out there for a long day, these definitely are better than the all plastic ones that came originally. So it's definitely something that Pelican has addressed, the newer seats. I haven't sat in the new ones yet, and I like these ones. They're cheap. I think I got these at Dunham's for, I don't know, $40 or something. So we use this thing. I'd say I'd give this probably maybe a 90% on my rating scale. So I give us a 90% on the review of the boat itself. All right, stay tuned. Now I'm going to go over the modifications that we did that worked and those that didn't. So stay tuned. Let's get into the modifications. I'm going to talk about all the ones that we did that were good and the ones that were not so good, and some of them were complete failures. Most of those are my ideas. But anyway, all right, so the first thing, let's talk about the floor. I already talked about it. This is the second floor we had. The first one we had in here was cow mat, I believe, or stall mat. And it worked. It worked fine. It was just heavy. Over time, what we figured out on the modifications are you have to be mindful of the weight that you put in the boat, especially with old Vancer on board, a bigger guy. So we got to be careful with how much weight we're putting into this boat. So that stall mat, although it was very durable, it was too heavy. So we ended up replacing it with this stuff. And this is just it. You got it at Lowe's. And it was super cheap, $25. It's basically carpet padding or yoga pad. I think we got it at Lowe's, so it's probably carpet padding. I see other guys putting it in theirs too. And it works. And again, it's dirty, and I've used the crap out of it. I've probably had it in there now for a good 4 years, and it's still intact. Probably could use a replacement, but I don't replace things that are still working. Next mod that I would say is one of our best is the Anderson connector. I know I've talked about this before. A lot of guys have asked me about it. This was High Life's idea back in the day, and it works awesome. I have the wires run down through the middle, and they go to a connector right here. And then you can easily clip the motor on there, and do the same thing back here. And it works great. Only downside of that mod is you have to immediately, if you get a trolling motor, and I'll walk over my trolling motor, you have to cut the cable on the trolling motor and install the Anderson connector on it, which, it's good and bad. I mean, it's, once you get the hang of doing it, it's not that big a deal. High Life has done all my motors for me, and so I have a 55 and also a 44, I think it is. Both of them are acting up. However, they both work great. It has nothing to do with the Anderson connector. But again, overall, that modification, excellent. And it hasn't been changed since we put it in. We actually then put it into the my son's boat, the Tenny, even though his is wired. And it's fantastic. So I can't recommend that one enough, the Anderson connector. Okay, floor, Anderson connector. All right, let's talk about the table. The table, this thing has gone through several iterations. This is, I want to say it's either the fourth or fifth different table. And again, the only reason why it keeps changing is, as I've gone to fish by myself a lot, I want something that was more narrow. So that was the idea of this. The original table was way bigger and was used with thicker wood. And again, it got to be too heavy for me to lift off the boat whenever I was fishing by myself. It was too heavy, but the original one was great. It still had 8 pole holders for this PVC pipe and the caps, and it worked great. It was wider. It was really designed for 2 guys to be fishing rather than 1. And we could both put 2 bags on there, a cooler, the whole 9 yards. The bottom line of it, it was just too heavy. So we had to cut it down. And so we cut it down. But that particular table, and we went on to modify it again. I'll show it here. And if you haven't seen those videos, go back and watch them. But we actually tried to put in a battery charger in it, a flat battery charger. And actually we did it. High Life was able to do it. And it just broke too quick. It wasn't designed, out in the water, out in the sun, all these things. It worked maybe once or twice, and then the switch broke. So that was a failure on the table. But we've actually had tables that have had the pole holders in the top. We've had them where they go down through. I built one a few years ago. It's over there in a corner. I don't feel like taking it out. But I built one that didn't require the bracket, because these are sometimes can be hard to find. I've seen other guys build tables that come out here and go down on the side. I think the best thing about this particular table is, we added these handles on towards the end, is you could take a lot of rods with you. Like in this case, I can take 8 rods with me. If somebody's coming with me, they could take 2 or 3, and I usually take 4 or 5, but you still could get 8 rods on here. A lot of guys will ask me too, like, how do you cast with that on there? It's really doesn't get in the way. Every once in a while, if you try an overhead cast, you're going to get in the way. But if you cast sidearm or backhanded, this doesn't even come into play. So it's definitely worth it, because, again, I've never lost a rod out of this, knock on wood. Never lost a rod. Even when we flipped the boat over, the table held some of the rods, and we didn't lose them. So this table, even though it's on its 5th iteration, and I'll put some pictures of tables 1 through 4 in the screen now, but the table, I would not fish without the table, just because I put my tackle bag on it, and it just can't be beat. But I would rank that modification is up there, one of the better ones. Again, there were some failures in there, different types. The phone charger was a failure, and making it too big and too heavy was a failure. Also another failure, and I'll put a picture of it here. We tried to mount the trolling motor, or I'm sorry, the Lowrance transducer off the table, and the reason that failed was because, again, taking it on and off, I have to take this off in order to get it into the trailer. So it made the table too heavy. By the time you had everything on the table, it made it too heavy with the Lowrance mounted on here. So again, it was another attempt at a mod that failed. So I wouldn't recommend that. I think where it is here is good, although this is still not right. And it's something I'll talk about in a second for something I need to address for this season. But so the table is also a successful modification. The ones in the back here, this modification is wrapped up with a rope right now, but this thing has gone through various iterations as well. At first, we just had a PVC pipe, and it was held on by basically Velcro tape, which it still is, and it works. But then we had where we made them bigger, so it was easier for me to get my pole in. They became cumbersome there, and I couldn't get my poles in and out. They got in the way when I was running either the Honda motor or the trolling motor, so I went back to the smaller ones. So the big ones may be good for getting your pole in, but the smaller ones work better and they stay out of the way better. So I would say it was a failure to make them bigger, even though they worked, but it was better to have the smaller ones. So that modification has been changed again over time. Another mod we had put different seats in here, and we put the heavier leather seats in here. And yes, they were comfortable, but they were just too darn heavy. So they were just too darn heavy, and they were hard to get on and off. You have to take them on and off the boat. My son likes them. I ended up giving them to him, but they ended up being too much weight. That's one thing that we've learned over the 8 years. no matter what mod you're doing, you got to be mindful of how much weight you're adding to the boat. So we've never had an issue with it almost sinking or anything like that. But still, it's more the process then of getting the thing in and out of the lake. A mod that I would call a success is just a simple strap. This has worked great. I use this strap to hold down. Once I'm out there, I don't really lay rods here, but I'll hold the oar in here because I've lost some oars over time. We kick them overboard, not realize. And remember one time Mike and I were out and we kicked the oar overboard, didn't even know where it was, so it was gone. But then, see, we did the same thing with the net. So the net also goes on one side, and it goes on the other. Someday we go on the river, I'll probably put the poles in here and keep those in there while we're traveling on the river. So I'd recommend these straps. That's a positive for sure. The next epic failure mod was an idea I had to try to get a pole to use as an anchor. And I did that last year, if you haven't seen that, or 2 years ago. And I put in these holders, these clips, that held the anchor. I don't know where the pole is anymore. It was supposed to be so that when I was out there and I wanted to stay in one spot, because I don't like to carry an anchor with me. I see guys have elaborate anchor systems. I don't do that because it's just, again, it's one more thing that adds weight, and it's another thing that just is in my way. So I was trying to build this pole system where I would put it down in. I think I have there's the contraption over there. This thing here, that guy right there, he was designed to go on the handle, and then I would run the pole down and jam it in the ground and keep me in one spot. I probably didn't give that enough run, but again, every time I tried to use it, even though I fish in relatively shallow water, I couldn't get it to dig into the ground, or I think the one I have is like 8 or 10 feet. It still wouldn't, even if I push it all the way down, it wouldn't hold the boat. It became more trouble than it was worth. And then in the meantime, I added these clips, and now they catch my shoelaces whenever I'm out there fishing. So this will be something that comes off this year. I'll take these off, and I'll have to plug those holes up. But that was a failure, definitely a failure. So don't do that one. Or if you do it better than I did. So another failure that we had was initially when we put the battery in the middle, it would jump up and down, and it actually bounced the river all over the place on the way to the lake. And so then I had to put that platform down. And ever since I did that and strapped it down, it hasn't done that anymore. And also we ratchet strap it down on the way to the lake. Speaking of batteries, stay tuned later. This winter I'll be finally getting a lithium-ion battery. So this guy will be replaced, and we're definitely going to do some comparison on weight. And I'm not sure how I'm going to secure it, if I'm going to stick with that. Obviously, these things are expensive, so I don't want it jumping out of the boat on the way to the lake. So we shall see. On another negative note is my Lowrance. This modification has not worked out for me just because of how I have this mounted. This will not, the transducer, when I put it over, it just will not reach into the water. It stays about right here. But when I'm sitting in the back of the boat, it lifts the front of the boat up, and it makes the transducer go in and out of the water, which makes the reading just constantly switching. It's like resetting continually because the transducer's coming in and out of the water. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that yet. I'm probably going to try to extend this. I like where it is, even though I don't like fishing out of the front of the boat. That's something I figured out this year. I tried to fish out of the front and put the table in the back and fish out here, and for whatever reason, I just don't like it. That's where the no rudder thing comes into play. The back end of the boat was all over the place. It's definitely more stable if you're fish out of the back, if you're by yourself, or more in the middle. That's not to say that I don't want this to work whenever I have guys with me, or if I'm going to a bigger body of water. I'm definitely going to use this for, just to get a sense of the depth, the water temperature, and see where the brake is and things like that. This is the most elaborate model, but it didn't work at all because of the way I put it on here. So this is something I want to address this off season. Try to get some, probably do some garage engineering to make this a little longer. It only needs to be about probably about 6 more inches would do it. So we'll have to figure that out for this year. But this is the failure of this year of the modifications. So I'd say one of my favorite modifications is this boat buckle. It's called the boat buckle. I wish I had that when I was doing had my bass boat. But that boat buckle, if you haven't seen that video, definitely go back. I reckon if you have a trailer, you got to get these. They're not that expensive. You got to get these things. They work so well, and it's just a matter of pulling them up, putting them on, and you're set. It keeps you from going anywhere. So super nice feature. That was a mod that was a big success. Something to be aware of too on a failure. I tried to put together a system where I put a rope here and a rope here that came together, and then I'd pull the boat. Well, you can't really put and leave more of the equipment and gear and everything in the boat to try to avoid taking everything out of the boat and then putting it back in, instead of having to take it all out and put it back in my truck. So I tried to rig something up, and these handles are not made to pull the full weight of this boat with everything on it. And both of them have snapped. Both of them have completely snapped off of there. And thankfully, I didn't pull it all the way through. I think this one broke a little more, but I got replacement handles from Pelican, and it was no big deal. They weren't that expensive, and I put them right back in, and the boat was no worse for the wear. However, I'm just saying it because don't do that. If you think you're going to be able to pull the whole boat out from the handles and leave everything in, it didn't work for me anyway. I've avoided putting something. I see guys put an eye bolt through here and then pull the boat out with that. I'm sure that works just fine. I don't want to do that because, again, occasionally if I'm running the Honda motor, then whoever's with me runs the trolling motor out of the front. So I don't do that. So I think that's it. I can't think of any other modifications that we tried. I think we tried, I know, another failure for us was we tried to lift the seats. We put a 6-inch riser on the seats, and those were not good. It made the boat way less stable for us anyway. I think we fished with that for like one time, and we were both, Mike and I both thought we were going into the water. It just made our center of gravity up higher, especially me, moving one way or the other. I think Mike thought he was going to swim. So we took those off after we took one trip, it took them right back off because we were just afraid. It just made the boat too topsy-turvy. So that was a failure. That mod was a complete and total failure. All right, guys. So in summary, that's pretty much it. That's the review of the boat after 8 years, and also all the mods that we tried that were successes and some that were failures. All right, that's going to be it, guys. I really appreciate you watching. Stay tuned. I'm going to be doing all kind of videos now out of the garage. The next review is going to be of the Honda motor over there, and I used it a handful of times this year. So I'll let you know what I did and didn't like about it, how it pushed the boat around. Is it worth it? And I think the jury's out on that particular thing because, again, I've only had it one season, only used it a handful of times. But I'll tell you what I think of it so far, and I'll show you how it works if you're interested in maybe getting that motor. But that's going to be it. Overall, 8 years, Pelican Bass Raiders has been great, really. And the modifications, some great, some not so great. Hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you're modding on your boat. If you already have a Pelican, what are you doing to it? What are some of the modifications you're going to do in this off season? And what are the ones that you saw on this channel and you implemented on your Pelican. Love to hear that from you guys. I see some of the things out there, but I've seen other things that guys have done that I've then tried to emulate. Not many, but there have been some. So leave me a comment. What are you working on right now on your Pelican? What is your modification schedule for this off season? All right, thanks for joining me. I'll see you next time. Hit subscribe, like, all that good stuff, and share the video and comment. And we'll see you soon on fishingwithvance.com.